This weekend, the sequel to Joker, the first R-rated movie to ever hit $1 billion, released in theaters, and people have passionate opinions about this movie. So let's talk spoilers. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your spoiler-packed thoughts on Joker 2. No need for a spoiler warning. The spoiler warning was in the title and thumbnail for this video. I've got chapter markers down below if you want to jump to a specific topic, theme, any of that fun stuff. And let's get started. Let's kick things off with my second thoughts on the film. And whenever I do these spoiler reviews, essentially I try to kind of like let you in on how my thoughts on a movie have evolved with time, because my out of the theater reactions I prefer for them to be literally right outside of the theater. I saw this movie at the Bob Bullock IMAX theater in Austin, across the street from the UT campus. In the background of that reaction, you can see the Texas Capitol because I shot it right in front of the theater. I had a couple quick discussions with people right side out of the theater, but I hadn't time to process the movie. I hadn't had time to think about what anyone else had said about the film. It was just my initial thoughts. And so you can see an evolution from that out of the theater reaction to the tweet that I wrote with my thoughts on it that was done like an hour or two later after my car ride home. And then the next day I recorded my spoiler-free review, and you can see, once again, the evolution of my thoughts on the film. But all of that was still really before I'd had any meaningful discussion with other people about the film, and that's intentional. I want to share my thoughts. What did I actually feel about it? But part of the fun of movies is that discussion of films. That's why you're here. You want to hear my thoughts on it, and other people's thoughts can start to shape and change your impressions of a movie. And with this movie, the reactions are just so wild and all over the place. So they've released the cinema score for this movie. It has a D cinema score. Cinema score, basically, they poll audiences coming out of the theater. So it's an audience poll opening night. Essentially, it's a measure of, did the opening night audience get what they wanted, or were they disappointed? A D cinema score. The lowest for like any Marvel movie. I think like 2 Marvel movies have a B. MCU movies specifically have a B. Almost all of them have an A- or better, like huge percentage of them, because comic book movies tend to be crowd pleasers. This has a D. According to what I saw, this is the lowest cinema score ever for a comic book movie. As of the time I'm filming this, its Rotten Tomatoes audience score is a 32%. And every time I look at this number, it drops lower. So I would be surprised that by the time I edit this and post this, that number has dropped even further. Its critic score was in the 60s prior to release. It's at 33%. This movie's dropping like a rock. So many people were actively angry at this movie. And then there's a small percentage that are like, oh, I loved it. It was like the most unexpected comic book movie I've ever seen. It was gorgeous. It was brilliant. It was thoughtful. It was subversive. And to me, that's what's so fascinating about this movie. When I talked about it having a mesmerizing quality, I still kind of hold to that. Like, there's something about this movie that's actually interesting. When you think about something like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, that generally speaking, people didn't like, they rejected it. What they didn't like about it is that it was so bland. It was so safe. It felt like it was just fitting right into the MCU formula. It had no bite. It had no edge. It was so actively trying not to step on anyone's toes that everyone was like, what's even the point of doing this? This movie is the opposite, that it's so actively playing against what everyone wants. We'll talk about that later on. If you want to skip ahead to my thoughts on the ending and how antagonistic this movie is towards its own fan base, you can skip ahead. But this movie seemed actively designed to step on the toes of all of its built-in fans. Everyone that would naturally be drawn to this movie, it's like it actively wanted to frustrate and anger you. That's kind of interesting to me. There's something about that I go, What a crazy thing to do. Both a crazy thing for Todd Phillips to be like, all right, I've got the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. I know what I'm going to do because Warner Brothers, they're going to let me do whatever I want because I've got so much sway right now. I'm going to piss off everyone. And afterwards, boy, is Warner Brothers going to be pissed off at me. There's something fascinating about that. Is this a movie that I plan on rewatching a lot? No. I mean, generally speaking, with these types of movies where I plan on doing a spoiler review, almost always I try to watch them a second time. Like The Batman, I watched it 3 or 4 times before I did my spoiler review. I literally kept watching it in the theater. It's a 3-hour-long movie. And for this film, I went to the fan-only screening Monday nights, the only fan screening. On Monday, that's my joke in my Joker review. On Monday night, it was IMAX because the Austin press screenings were going to be 2 days later. I think they did that intentionally so fans would see it first, critics would see it later. But the press screenings weren't at the IMAX, so I definitely want to see it at IMAX, and I wanted to see it as soon as possible. But I had 2 different options on Wednesday to see it a second time where I could watch it for free. And then also I could have just bought tickets for opening night. And I just didn't want to. Like, it's not like I was like, do I want to sit through that again? No, I don't. That kind of says a lot about how much I enjoyed the film, where for my job, I have a reason to do it a second time. As a comic book fan, I usually just do that out of habit and how I do things. But also, to be fair, I didn't rewatch the first Joker until last week. I watched it when it came out, loved it. But it's not the type of movie that you naturally rewatch. It's not designed to be like an entertainment popcorn ride at all. Like, that's what it's great about, is the opposite of that. So, to be fair, I didn't want to rewatch this film, but I also did not rewatch the first film either. But yeah, like trying to unpack how do I actually feel about this movie. I respect the audacity of it. I do think there's so many gorgeous shots in it of like just things that shouldn't be eye-catching are, because it's just shot in a way that feels so big and massive. But when you have a movie that just feels so dedicated to not delivering anything that would please its audience, an anti-crowd pleaser, you're alienating me. Like, there's some things that are kind of interesting in here. We'll kind of talk about that in a little bit, of some things that even through the discussion I've been like, that's kind of interesting. But for the most part, like, I, in and of myself, didn't think it had anything that interesting to say. I don't think it justified its existence because it just felt like an epilogue to the other film, and it felt like it was just mashing on toes. So it's a film that I think is worth seeing on the level of art is supposed to elicit a reaction from people. Art is supposed to hit people in different ways. So the fact that they put out a movie that so many people are utterly rejecting, lowest cinema score ever for a comic book movie, and others are calling it a masterpiece and loving it, that's interesting art. It's more interesting than all of the comic book movies that feel produced by committee. The director is just a McDonald's manager. This is a lot more interesting than that. For that reason, I think that people should go see it and make up your own mind. If you have any curiosity about it, for that reason, you should see it to join the conversation, see where you land on it, engage with art that you might hate. I said that going into this movie. I said it in some videos. I don't know how I'm going to feel about this movie. I said I might go into this movie and I might end up hating it. That's one of the reasons I'm excited to see it, because that's interesting, where you kind of know how you're going to feel about a Marvel movie when you go into it. Which degree of, I enjoyed that, or like, this one looks like one of those I'm not going to enjoy so much. And like, you kind of know exactly what you're going to get when you go into it. And this was interesting art. Did I enjoy it? Not so much. Did it hold my attention? Yes, it did. Did it pique my interest? Was it interesting to me? Was it something I want people to engage with? Yes, it is. I had people like respond to my out of the theater reaction, my review, like, dude, why are you trying to glaze this over? Why are you trying to pretend like this movie is good? Dude, why you're trying so hard to polish this turd. You're trying so hard to convince people that this bad movie is good. Like, it's really not that. This is a more interesting bad movie than most bad movies. That's called nuance. Like, there's movies that you watch, like you watch Madam Web, and I go, this is an incoherent film where I don't think they even pulled off what they were going for. I don't think that this is Madam Web. I think they delivered pretty much the movie they wanted to deliver. They just delivered a movie that the fans of the first one did not want. It was a bizarre idea that I don't think really worked for me. But they delivered the movie they wanted to deliver. It wasn't like this manufactured mess of everyone's changing their mind and everyone too many cooks in the kitchen. This is a singular vision. It's just maybe not a good singular vision. And that's what makes it interesting. That you can have nuanced thoughts on it and go, wow, these performances are great. Wow, these images are striking. Why on earth is it a musical? Why did they make this movie? Why did they do, like, that's the tension that makes certain films more interesting to discuss than others. This is an interesting movie to discuss. Next topic, what does this movie have to say? So one of the things I repeated in my out of the theater, my tweet, my non-spoiler review was that I didn't know what this movie had to say. That it felt like it was rehashing a lot of the same themes, touching on a lot of the same ground, and felt like just an epilogue rather than having its own fresh new ideas. What's one of the reasons I don't think it justified its own existence in a lot of ways. So I put that out there, and I had someone respond to me on TikTok. They did a stitch or whatever, and they said, hey, I really enjoy his thoughts, and I kind of strongly disagree with him on this because I think the movie had a pretty clear message to say about identity.
And I heard you say something, Sean, about you're not sure what this film is trying to say. I made a comment, I believe it was in one of your videos, that this is the Stardust memories of the Joker films, or of Todd Phillips. It's Todd Phillips' Stardust Memories. And if we remember right, Stardust Memories was basically Woody Allen's middle finger to his fans at the time. But that doesn't mean it didn't have a consistent theme. And so does this one. From the very first shot, animated sequence of the film, to the things that we won't talk about because they're spoilery, this film had a very consistent theme, and that theme was identity. You know, Arthur's really trying to be the person that he feels that he is. Not the person his mother wanted him to be, not the person society wants him to be, not the person the prison guards want him to be, not the person that Harley wants him to be. And he interweaves that with this mixture of identities throughout the film, whether it's a musical, whether it's a courtroom drama, whether these animated sequences, even these musical numbers aren't really sure what they want to be. The whole film has the theme of identity interwoven in it.
And what he said made a lot of sense. I'd have to fully rewatch the movie and to see that I think if it actually went anywhere with it. But his point was the whole movie is about Arthur struggling with his identity, where in the first movie, no one notices Arthur. He feels completely unnoticed, only to be bullied. He's an object of bullies, but they don't even notice the person. They just see a thing to attack. No one cares about him. And he's struggling to be noticed, to have his work, his stand-up. People see him, to make people laugh, and just people keep passing him by. The events of the first film happen. We start the second movie, and as this if you're looking for continuation of the Joker narrative, you'll be utterly disappointed by this film because Todd Phillips is not interested in the Joker. He's interested in Arthur. So you get into the second movie, and it is its own exploration of Arthur, where no one noticed him in the first movie until the end, and now everyone knows who Arthur is, and everyone has an opinion on who he should be and what he should do. And the whole movie is Arthur struggling with that tension. And at the beginning of it, you see him kind of overtly having kind of this paralysis of analysis, where he's walking around just in his own thoughts. The guards are mocking him. You're the Joker? Tell us a joke. What joke do you have for us? Just mocking him. And if he tells them a joke, he gets a cigarette. So he's like a pet for them. You get a treat every time you tell us a joke. Every time you do the trick, you get a cigarette. And then he meets with his lawyer, and the lawyer's psychiatrist or therapist, whatever it is, that's analyzing him. And they have a distinct narrative that they want him to follow. Like, we think that you're crazy, that you were abused as a child, and because of that, your personality split, and it created an aggressive second personality that can protect Arthur. And so what happened was you were bullied, a series of things happened, and to protect you, the second personality came out. So Arthur, did this happen? Arthur, did this happen? And they tell him what they want him to say. They tell him what they want to be true about him. And then they ask all these leading questions that cause him to like he's clearly not playing into their game, but other times he kind of does. He uses some of those phrases later on, like, I blacked out. That was a phrase they told him. I don't remember much except this. There's all this stuff they told him where his lawyers are trying to tell him who they want him to be so that he can win the case. Now, they're saying that because they're literally trying to save his life from the death penalty. But there's a side to it. They're telling him who he is. And then he knows that the public knows about him. And he has all these fans. And there's people that are obsessed with him. But not him, the Joker. Which goes back to the beginning of the movie. What's the first thing we see in this film? Is that the Joker, it starts off with a cartoon of Arthur trying to do his thing, and his shadow keeps getting in the way, taking over. He's living in his own shadow, which is like taking I'm living in someone else's shadow. He is living in someone else's shadow, but it's his own split thing. He's living in the shadow of his own reputation. And then that's what's going on here. Everyone knows who he is suddenly. Everyone notices him. But they notice Joker, and they want him to be Joker, and they want that from him. It's kind of interesting. And then the most extreme kind of extension of this is then he meets Harley. And what was something that he so longed for in the first film, that like his whole delusion in the first film was of meeting someone that actually loved and cared and connected with him, his neighbor. So there's this whole subplot in the movie that's a delusion. So you go into this movie, I bet many of you, like me, when you're first watching it, thought that Harley was a delusion. That this is one more, like he doesn't actually have a Harley Quinn. She doesn't actually care about him. It's a delusion. And it turns out that's not exactly what's going on here. Folie à deux means a shared delusion, two people that have the same delusion. And so the idea that she was his delusion would just be one person having the delusion. So even the title tells you that that's not where it's heading with this. But following the example of the first film, first time you see Harley, I was like, okay, you see her and no one else interacts with her. And then series of things happen all the way through them trying to escape. I was like, this is a delusion. Did he do this? How are they going to explain that she's a delusion? And then it makes it very clear that she's a real person. And so once again, our expectations for the movie is that she'll be a delusion. It's not that. It's meant, okay, she's real. But she is fully lying to him to live out this delusion with him, that he's the Joker, and she's telling him who he should be on the trial. Don't listen to your lawyers. Don't do any of that. You're the Joker. And she's just trying to invent a delusion with him. It's the title of the movie. And all of it, someone is telling him who he should be. But this is what he wants. He wants to connect with a person. He wants romance. He wants love in his life. And so he embraces the person that gives him that. And I'll pick the identity that she wants for me. And so then Joker starts to come out more once that romance starts. And he starts acting out the Joker more in light of that identity perspective. You go, oh, that's kind of interesting. And you get into the trial, and I think when you start having him dressing up and doing all those shenanigans, it starts straining so much credibility because like he's just doing nonsense as a show that I don't know that a judge would, even if there's precedent for people to dress ridiculous, I don't know that you can act like a clown and just say nonsense in a silly voice without the judge being like, no, we're not, this charade is over. But where all of this starts to change, turns on its head, is that he starts to interrogate his friend from the first film that survived, the guy that he didn't kill. And he's doing the whole show, the whole deal. And this person that was his actual friend, to the extent that, I'm not going to kill you. Like, you're my friend. Why would I kill you? From the first film, he's like, kills the other guy that kind of bullied him a little bit. But his friend who never bullied him, who acknowledged him, who recognized him, the person that knew Arthur, he's not Joker to that person. He's Arthur to that person. So he's kind of doing the show on there. And when his friend that is friends with Arthur is afraid of Joker, all of a sudden he, like, it softens him because it's like the one person that cared about Arthur, my real identity, hates what I'm doing now. And it's like where he snaps out of it. And there's just, that's the thing that softens him of like, wait a minute. What I want is what that guy gave me. And that guy's afraid of me. That's kind of interesting. This, like, what you're kind of doing with Arthur in this exploration. Now, if you want a Joker movie out of your Joker Folie, Deux, that's how what this is. This is an extended epilogue for Arthur's journey. It is not a continuation of Joker, but as a study of identity in someone that everyone in life wants to be noticed. Everyone wants to be significant. And when you can't find significance through healthy means and mechanisms, you will turn towards destructive mechanisms. So why do people on the internet troll people, act obnoxious, spread hate, like things like that in an anonymous setting where there's no consequences? Because they can do all this stuff and get noticed. They get attention. That's normal psychological. Like you need to move the needle a little bit. And if trying to engage in a healthy way doesn't work, suddenly you engage in something toxic. Why on earth do people get so invested in weird online movements? So they feel like they're moving the needle and making a difference. That's normal psychology that explains so much behavior. And that's so much of what Arthur's story is, of someone that felt like he did not matter. No one noticed him. Nothing he did could ever pop and stand out. He has no confidence. So then when he becomes Joker and starts acting out, he feels like people notice him, that he has control of his life. He can make an impact on the world around him, but he turned to such a toxic place to do it. And this movie is the epilogue of Arthur coming to grips with the reality of that Arthur does not want to be a killer. Arthur is not actually the Joker. We'll get to that later on in this video. He's not actually the Joker. He's not actually a killer. And he's putting on this show for all these people. Like, he has the attention he has always wanted. But that attention is not what he wanted either. He didn't set out to be a killer who's not famous, he's infamous. And all these fans, like, why are they fans of me for that? That's not what he wanted. And so he kind of comes to grips with that at the end of it. And that's where Harley rejects him. But Harley, all we had was the delusion. But obviously we're not going to go build a mountain. It does not even make any sense. What did build a mountain? What does it even mean? Of course, it's all a delusion. Of course, we're just playing a game. We're playing roles. We're pretending. And you stop pretending, so we have nothing. I don't care about Arthur. I care about the delusion with Joker. When the delusion ends, what's the point? And so then he's kind of left alone. Thought that was kind of interesting. So once again, I'll put on the screen out here that all this came from like one little thoughts came from this one guy putting up a stitch where made me go, that's interesting. So I'll put his information in here, and you can. I've never interacted with him other than seeing that and put it commented in there. But I thought it made me think about something. Like, my takeaway watching it was, this has nothing to say. What does this have to say? And then he kind of put some thoughts in my head, and I went, I think there is something there. I didn't even mean to ramble for however long I've been rambling here, but I think there's a little bit more in here that some people are missing, even that I missed. I don't know that I still enjoyed the movie, but I do think that it has more than what a lot of people are giving it credit for. All right, let's talk about Harley Quinn. So when they announced they're doing this movie, Lady Gaga's going to play Harley Quinn. Of course, it was going to always be an Elseworld version of it, but, of course, that got people's attention because Harley is a very popular character. Lady Gaga is a very, of course, famous singer, and if she's interested in it and they want to bring it, and it's going to be a musical, what are we going to do with all of this? And then the reactions coming out of the earliest showings of this film at a film festival were like, she's barely in the movie, she's a side character, and don't get your hopes up. So I went into it kind of with that on my mind, that people were saying that she's barely in the movie. And I felt like I got about the amount of Harley that I was expecting from the movie. Now, if you were like, perhaps that's because you had those early reactions tempering expectations, and if you're expecting a breakout in a Bonnie and Clyde narrative in the back half of the film, you'd be utterly disappointed by this film. But I was not expecting a Bonnie and Clyde breakout. I went in like, okay, they say it's a musical, she's a supporting character, and it's a courtroom drama. And you can see the trailer, and they're just not on the run. They're not free. So kind of, okay, I guess it's going to be pretty restrained. So I got as much Harley Quinn as I was kind of expecting from the movie. I think the frustration with Harley Quinn in this movie is that she's essentially the flip of the comic dynamic with the Joker, where she actually originated in Batman the Animated Series, and then they did Mad Love comic, and Mad Love was a episode of the show and everything like that. But the story is that she was his psychiatrist while he was in Arkham, and then through his insanity and his charm, he's able to connect with her and kind of manipulates her into turning into a supervillain with him. And so the person with the power in the relationship that's manipulating is Joker, manipulates a normal person to becoming his psycho sidekick. That's an oversimplification and some things like that, but it's that sort of dynamic. The person with the power was Joker. And so then they tell this story. Once again, the whole last section of this is how this movie is antagonistic towards its own audience, and its own built-in fans, and turns everything on its head. But they introduce this as someone that is also locked up at this place. And it becomes very clear pretty quickly that she's lied about almost everything she said. Everything she initially tells him is a lie. And as it goes along, it's not just a lie so that she can meet him because she's a fan. It's that it's all a manipulation. She has all the power, and Harley is manipulating Arthur into being the Joker. This is once again where this movie's kind of interesting. It will make you angry. It will match on your toes if you are familiar with the source material. But it's interesting because it is constantly turning everything on its head. Joker's not manipulating Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn is manipulating Arthur to be the Joker through lies, deceptions, playing against the two things that he wants. He wants attention and he wants love. She offers him both of those things. She tells him his movie was great. It was amazing. She tells him everything he wants to hear so that they can have this shared delusion together. But she's the one manipulating him, pulling all of that out of him. That's interesting. It's subversive. Do I like it? Is it a good Joker story? Like, okay, there's a lot of things I'm not crazy about in that. But it's an interesting version of I don't like that. Hence why it's a movie that is just so splitting audiences and pulling out such big emotions. Because it's not just that it's doing its own thing. It's doing its own thing while toying with what you do want. It takes it all, and it will get to that, but like it knows the Mad Love story and turns it on its head. It knows what you liked about the first movie. It turns it on its head constantly without necessarily delivering something more satisfying, just subverting everything that you're expecting out of this film, which is fascinating. It's interesting. It is certainly a way to approach a film. Is it a good idea? Probably not, if you're trying to make money. But it's fascinating. So when you get to the point, like there's a lot of tragic things in your death of Arthur and all these things. The tragic one for me is, as an audience, we've been following Arthur's longing for love all this time. And Arthur has the moment where he decides, I'm going to own up. I killed those people. I did it. That was me. That was my way of grabbing control, having significance, being important. I did that. This is not Joker. As soon as he says that, as soon as he rejects the title delusion with Harley, She walks out of the room, like gut-wrenching, like, he thought that someone loved him. He thought that someone cared about him, Arthur. And all she cared about was the shared delusion. And if you're trying to find another way to have the tragedy of Arthur, this is not a Joker story, it's an Arthur story. Tragedy of Arthur, where Arthur is trying to find all of these things. The first movie, he finds his strength through turning into a psycho and killing people. Oversimplifying the film, but very nervous, afraid person finds passion, finds his confidence in becoming a monster, the worst version of himself. This movie, he finds love, but the person only loves the monster. It does not care about him at all, and it is manipulating him so that it can gain access to the monster, just adding to the tragedy of Arthur. Like I said, there's a lot more. I think at face value, I get why everybody, like so many people, just felt like their toes were stepped on because the movie's actively doing that. I do think there's more in here if you watch it as an Arthur movie. Arthur, Folie, Deux. Oh, what is this? There's some interesting things in there. Yeah, and then her utter rejection at the end, I think, once again, is where she openly states, all we had was the delusion. You're like, okay, there we go. There you go. The title told us exactly what this movie was, that the two of them have a shared delusion. Only thing is, one of them knew it was a shared delusion, and one of them didn't. Final segment, the ending, but really a discussion of how this movie is so actively antagonistic towards its own fans. Whatever you wanted out of Joker Folie Deux, this movie seems dedicated to mashing on your toes. You wanted a Joker movie? Nah, this is an Arthur character study about identity. We're doing a sequel to this Martin Scorsese clone that was inspired by Taxi Driver, King of Comedy. What are we going to do in this one? It's a courtroom musical. About the furthest thing from Taxi Driver that you can get. As a musical, sure, the sequences are gorgeous, but the songs are not memorable. As a courtroom drama, because most of it is Arthur just doing his Joker shtick, there's no intrigue, there's no interesting courtroom or legal dynamics in it. As a blockbuster, it is the sequel to the first R-rated movie to ever reach $1 billion. And they picked a genre, musical, which has never produced a live-action billion-dollar film. The largest grossing live-action musical is Bohemian Rhapsody that only made $900 million. So they picked like the one genre that cannot match the success of the previous film. You want Harley Quinn in here? Instead of Joker manipulating her to become a villain, she talking too fast. Instead of Joker manipulating Harley and turning her into a villain, Harley manipulates Arthur to get him to be Joker. And if you wanted a Joker origin story out of this duology of films pitched as a Joker origin study, nah, Arthur gets killed at the end. He's not the Joker after all. He says it in court. I'm not the Joker. I'm not that guy. And then he gets killed at the end. So whatever you wanted out of this movie, it finds a way to just mash on your toes. Just step on them repeatedly over and over again. So you go, how surprising is it that this movie has a 32% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes and a D cinema score, the lowest cinema score any comic book movie has ever had? It's not surprising at all, because they made a movie that is designed to flip everything on its head. It's designed to subvert all expectations in the most frustrating of ways. That you actively go, like Cinema Score itself measures, did audiences get what they want? This movie was very intentional about making sure you did not get anything that you wanted out of this movie other than gorgeous shots and great performances. If you went in with the most obvious expectations to have for this film, you weren't going to get it. And that was the plan all along. So in my review, I was discussing, some of the early reviews called this a troll of a movie that's antagonistic towards its fans. And then I said that, I don't know if it's exactly that. Changed my mind. Like Todd Phillips very much seemed to be actively trolling, giving the double guns to everything and everyone. Warner Brothers begs him, you'd make an R-rated movie that costs like $70 million and it makes $1 billion. First R-rated movie ever to make $1 billion. Of course the studio's going to come to you with a dump truck full of money, be like, please give us another one. And Todd Phillips, whether because he's an asshole, because he's brilliant, because he's a troll, whatever way you want to do it, like he goes, okay, you're gonna give me a dump truck of money to make a sequel to a movie that doesn't need a sequel? Here we go. Well, it's everything that anybody could want. And the fact that Warner Brothers allowed him to make it a musical, the genre, like you have animated musicals that have crossed that $1 billion line. And I guess you could say Disney live action remakes of animated musicals have crossed that line. But outside of nostalgia projects, Disney live action remakes, and animated films, we do not have $1 billion musical. This just doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. And he went to them, all right, you want me to make a sequel to my $1 billion Scorsese clone? It's a musical. And they let him do it. There's something about that that is so utterly fascinating. They actually went, Todd, we desperately want you to do this. Could you pick any genre besides the one that can't reach $1 billion? But they let him do it. And then he went, all right, you know how I pitched this as a Joker origin character study? He's not the Joker. And they let him do it. Some of these other ones, I don't think they would have been as frustrated, but the two, he picked a genre that can't reach $1 billion, and he picked we're going to completely just cut the legs off of the whole concept of this whole deal. You guys wanted an origin for Joker? Nah, that's not what's happening here at all. Nah. Okay. You played us, Todd. You played us. I think it's a film that I think you will need a certain amount of time to process it, to be able to accept it on its own terms. But what do you do with a $200 million troll of a movie? I don't know. That it exists is so amusing to me. Did I like it? Do I want to rewatch it? I'm not naturally leaning in that direction. But on the other hand, I do respect that Todd Phillips is such a bold personality that he would do that. And that they keep giving him money to do this because, he did this with the Hangover movies too. It's he does 2 sequels. One of them is a beat-for-beat copy of the first one, just meaner and nastier, and pushing the boundaries. Whoa, you put that in the movie? And then the third one is let's just do a totally different genre. Go, what? Not deliver anything that people want to, at all. Just, woo! And then they gave him $200 million to make a musical that's a sequel to a Taxi Driver King of Comedy clone. That's crazy. Kind of love it though. Not necessarily the movie, but the big picture concept of all of this. So I don't know. Like I said, my feelings on it are so mixed. There's all these ways where the more I think about it, the more I'm oh man, I didn't enjoy that at all. But then the more I think about it, I'm oh, that was interesting. There's actually some stuff in here that you can unpack it. Circling back to what we said at the beginning. That's why this movie is interesting to me. That I didn't necessarily like it doesn't necessarily mean I don't think you should see it. Because I think it's a lot of it's just a cash grab. It's just a beat for beat. They didn't try. I reject all of that. I think they manufactured something very specific. I don't know that many people wanted it. It certainly actively went against what most people would have wanted out of this film. So actively so, per everything I just pointed out. But, I don't forget. So they made something that actually had an artistic point. Even if it was middle fingers to the fans in the studio, they were making a point. You guys, like, you wanted more of this? What? No. Like, it had an artistic point to it. It had a voice. It was doing something. Was it clear? Like, was it to make a good movie? And I don't know if it was that point, but I respect that there was some sort of artistic motivation behind all of this. I'm not sure all of what it was. I'm still in the middle of processing it all. So make of that what you will. A movie like this actually evoked emotions from people. It actively evoked a response from people. I respect that. I think that matters. There's so many generic movies that feel like they were just generated by done on the assembly line, produced by committee, whatever phrase you want to use that many of us overuse. That's not what this was. Might not be good, but at least it wasn't that. That's all I have to say about this movie. Let me know what you thought down below in the comments section. Check out my other thoughts right over here. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much.